to a Chinese energy company. The committee chairman, James Comer, alleges a Biden family associate received millions from that energy company. Comer says that money was then paid to Biden's family members. Democrats say there's no evidence to support this. Later in the show,
no evidence to support it. Oh, wow.
Others.
Reforms of the pension system.
Hello, everybody. You know the Chinese want all that money back that the Biden crime family got. That's what they want. They're going to get as much as they can.
Related to Rob Walker. In the memo, Comer questions why Haley Biden, who's publicly reported to work as a school counselor, received money from Robinson Walker. The White House has repeatedly denied that President Biden has knowledge of these family business dealings. We reached out to the White House but did not receive a response by airtime. Now, let's look into what exactly Hunter Biden is being accused of. Back before the 2020 presidential election, Hunter Biden's business dealings caught the public's attention. The New York Post first reported on Hunter Biden's overseas activities in China and Ukraine. One of his former associates, Tony Bobulinski, came forward about an alleged business venture between him, Hunter Biden, the president's brother Jim Biden, and CEFC China Energy. The Chinese conglomerate has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Bobulinski strongly suggested that the firm engaged Hunter to gain access to his father, Joe Biden, then vice president. A Senate report from 2020 shows that Hunter Biden is the co-owner of a company named Hudson West 3. According to the report, CEFC China Energy wired $5 million to Hudson West in 2017. Not long after, Hudson West sent multiple payments to Hunter Biden's law firm Owasco, labeled as consulting fees. The payments totaled about $4.8 million. Around the same time, Hudson West moved over $1 million to Hunter's uncle, James Biden's consulting firm. The Senate report identifies the transaction as potential financial criminal activity. And in September 2017, Chinese businessman Dong Guangwen opened a bank account together with Hunter Biden. Hunter, James, and Sarah Biden were all authorized users of credit cards associated with the account. They later used the cards to purchase over $100,000 worth of luxury items. The Chinese businessman is also a co-owner of Hudson West, and at the same time, an associate of the chairman of CEFC China Energy. A previous media report shows that in 2017, Hunter Biden helped negotiate a deal for CEFC to invest $40 million in a Louisiana-based natural gas project. The project reportedly fell through the following year. According to the Senate report, Hunter Biden had also agreed to represent another associate of the CEFC chairman's, Patrick Ho, in his corruption trial. Ho was sentenced to 3 years in a New York federal court for bribing top African officials to help CEFC get local oil businesses. U.S. prosecutors had also accused him of trying to sell weapons to Middle East countries and of helping Iran obtain funds from Chinese banks. According to a New York Times report, when American authorities arrested Patrick Ho, the first phone call he made was to James Biden. And now, a background check on CEFC China Energy. It had been one of China's largest conglomerates before its bankruptcy in 2020, under a Beijing clampdown on domestic companies. The giant did global business in oil and offered financial services, and made the Fortune Global 500 list at the time. Its chairman, Ye Jianming, was once touted as the Chinese Rockefeller. CEFC China Energy was private in name, but hired numerous high-ranking former officials from the Chinese military and Hong Kong as executives. CEFC Chairman Ye fell out of favor with Chinese authorities in 2018. He was charged with embezzlement, and the company shut down 2 years later. He since disappeared from the public eye.
If you have any news tips or feedback for the show, don't hesitate to email us at news.today@ntd.com. And just ahead, Ukrainian volunteers treat patients in a makeshift ambulance made from a converted bus. They're part of a wider network of evacuation teams in Ukraine. And Russians who fled to the nearby country of Georgia are
overall health of the banking system. I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them. This week's actions demonstrate our resolute commitment to ensure that our financial system remains strong and that depositors' savings remain safe.
The comments were Yellen's first to lawmakers since the weekend's emergency measures to backstop depositors. But it seems not everyone agrees with Yellen's comment. Economist Peter Schiff said her comment is as accurate as calling inflation transitory. As economist Daniel Lacaille told us previously, Schiff also blames the Fed's easy money policy in the past, saying that's why banks' assets are losing value now. He's concerned the way the government is supporting the banks is going to fuel inflation.
The way they are bailing out all the banks is by printing new money and adding it into the economy and taking on mortgages and government debt onto their already bloated balance sheet. So the Fed's balance sheet is going to go up, the money supply is going to go up, and that means consumer prices are going to go way up.
The House
on waking up to the fact that war is not just peace or war. It's binary, on or it's off, the way that our Pentagon has seen it in the past. So our adversaries view war on a continuum, and they're fighting everything short of war. Yes, conventional war is significant and important, and we have to be prepared for it. But there's all this continuum leading up to conventional war, which is really called unrestricted warfare. And that's weakening the United States by anything that the Chinese Communist Party can do, along with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, and a few others, which is fentanyl, social media like TikTok, economics, stealing intellectual property, all these types of things. This is listed in this press release. So this press release is something very serious for every American to get knowledge on and to pass it among their families, peers, colleagues, and so on. Again, this is a seminal paradigm shift in the way that the Pentagon sees war, and that the war is at the front lines of this war is actually our companies, our economy, which is our companies, and our civilians. So it's very, very critical.
And Casey, you mentioned the term unrestricted warfare, and in this release it also mentions that exact same term in reference to this book published by two Chinese colonels back in 1999. So what is unrestricted warfare? How would you sum this up?
Unrestricted warfare is no rules. That's really what unrestricted means. It means no rules. So it means attacking the civilians and everything we stand for, everything that holds our society together, everything to weaken us and to win without fighting. And that's really what this article is. It's to win without fighting. And that's what unrestricted warfare is. When I mentioned TikTok, fentanyl, just you name it, going after stealing intellectual property and taking entire industries and putting them over in China, which is like solar panels, energy, windmills, you name it. Those are all U.S. technologies, and now you can't get them unless you purchase them through China. So basically, it's, this article also says that more of the same is not enough. In other words, more conventional kinetic war is not enough. The military has to plan for this whole unrestricted warfare, which is everything but or everything short of conventional war, to weaken your adversary. And remember, when I say adversary, the military still likes to call it competition. Let me tell you, it's absolutely war. When the Chinese Communist Party refers to it as war, then by golly, it's war. Make no
right direction. I did agree with what the Fed did and the Treasury did over the weekend to stop the bleeding, so to speak, on the immediate aftermath. But longer term, I think a lot of our regional banks and the smaller banks in particular are going to want some reassurances that they're going to be able to compete with the big ones, the big five. And so I think it's going to take a couple of months for consumers outside to recognize that all of these banks are stable.
Is it okay to let a bank fail?
let's think about this for just a second. When we talk about allowing a bank to fail, if it's one thing to say it's okay to allow the owners of a bank to lose their resources, it's another thing to say that the depositors should necessarily be allowed to lose their deposits. That's the reason why we begin with $250,000 in protection. Perhaps that's not enough. We started at $200,000 a few years ago. We bumped it to $250,000 per deposit. Then the question is whether or not that's still appropriate as things rise, as we have inflation and so forth. Should we bump that up? The other piece is whether or not within the commercial marketplace and among the banks themselves, can they arrange for things such as interest rate swaps and so forth? Can they use those to actually protect themselves a little bit better, kind of like buying reinsurance on those accounts. So I think among them, there are some tools out there. The real question is whether or not all of the banks are taking advantage of the tools available to them right now.
Are you at all concerned, though, by protecting all these deposits? We're sending the message to the real high-stakes private equity folks that, you know what, we'll always back you up, even if you make a stupid bet.
No, look, and that's a really good question, but you have to remember that because of Dodd-Frank to begin with, we've identified that there are a group of banks, the very largest, that we've identified as being too big to fail. And they're significant to the entire financial services of the United States, and therefore it is suggested very strongly that we won't let them fail. Now the question is does that mean that they should have a competitive advantage over small and medium-sized banks when it comes to trying to lure depositors in? We want to make sure that the tools are available for those smaller banks to be able to spread the risk, and so that if a depositor comes in, and a lot of businesses will have more than $250,000 in their accounts. When they do, should they be able to be assured that there are commercial products available that the banks are availing themselves to, so that they can actually spread that risk out, and those depositors then know that they're safe in the smaller regional banks, and that they don't have to move the deposits to a bank that may very well have challenges because they're so large, but that they have the backing of the federal government behind them. They are a SIFI. And I want to make sure that we don't skewer the competition between the very largest banks and those very, very needed medium and small banks that really do the vast majority of the commercial lending in the small communities across the entire United States.
Seems pretty clear to me.
And this accounts for destruction
Oh
coming about.
boy, had they.
This kind of sin is what has been referred to in religious contexts as original sin. So that the universe could be saved, the Creator directed a multitude of higher beings and divine sovereigns to descend to the earth and assume human form in this setting, where they would suffer, elevate, atone for their sins, and forge themselves anew, reascending to heaven as a
You
result.
got an opportunity.
The
It's
Creator
up to
has been
you.
remaking the universe at the same time as saving.
The government admits they know surveillance footage or things used for enhancing targeting of the battlefield is being sold by Chinese companies, but they say no lethal support yet has happened. You're saying you don't believe that?
I don't believe that. I think what you're going to see in the coming days and weeks is more and more evidence of Chinese support. China doesn't want to get caught doing this, right? Because at the same time as they're helping the Russians murder Ukrainians, they're also saying, hey, China's open for business. And they're trying to appeal to American and other investors to continue to prop up their statist mercantilist model, even as they commit genocide, even as Xi Jinping, just in the recent People's Congress last week, he gave really 4 speeches, essentially preparing the Chinese people for war. I mean, these were jingoistic speeches. He also made it clear that the security economy is going to dominate, over the free market economy or the tech sector. And so I think it's time for us really to assess the degree to which we have been over many years underwriting in many ways our own demise, with investments in China and really not doing more to shore up fragile supply chains. We've essentially given an authoritarian regime coercive power over our economy.
I want to ask
much
you,
like Europe did with Russia on hydrocarbons.
I want to ask you about Republican Governor Chris Sununu wrote an op-ed saying some in the Republican Party have lost their moral compass on foreign policy, evidenced by former President Trump, who once called Putin's invasion genius and savvy. The governor of Florida has said similar things that appear to be diminishing the importance of the conflict. What do you make of the fact that top two contenders for president in the Republican Party are pushing this?
Well, I think it's sad, Margaret. I think, why not just focus on two things? Look at how valorous the Ukrainians have been fighting for their own freedom. That should restore confidence, maybe, in our own nation and the gift that we have of being free and having freedom of expression and freedom from fear. I think also look at just the atrocities that have been visited on the Ukrainian people. And then also recognize that it's in our interest. Where does it stop? Putin went to Sebastopol.
Yes.
He annexed in 2014.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, there's a direct
responsible for the Kabul airport bombing that killed 13 American service members during the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. During a recent hearing on Capitol Hill, the head of U.S. Central Command asked lawmakers for more funding to prevent any future attacks.
They can do an external operation against U.S. or Western interests abroad in under 6 months with little to no warning.
Well, since the Taliban took over the country in 2021, U.S. intelligence has been limited due to the withdrawal of American military personnel and intelligence officials from the country. Well, the House Oversight Committee is investigating potential financial connections between a Chinese firm and multiple members of the Biden family. It includes the president's son, Hunter Biden. Democrats, however, are pushing back, saying Republicans have found no evidence connecting these payments to the president. But the chairman of the committee recently sent a letter to Biden family associate who claimed he received $3 million from a Chinese energy company and wired those funds to Biden's daughter-in-law, Haley.
They said there was nothing to the laptop. I don't think the White House ever thought that I would get my hands on those bank records.
They were getting the money for something. We don't have that information yet, but we're going to go find out.
And their alliance with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, and so on. So you're seeing this whole thing play out, and companies are finally realizing that their investments with China are at risk, and not just at risk, they're at extreme risk. In fact, China just got rid of, or just has announced that they are kicking out all of the U.S. auditors, the U.S. consulting firms, and saying we don't need these auditors anymore. We're going to use our own auditors. So that's decoupling at the highest level. So, when you're looking at decoupling and our economies are aligned, that's been our mistake. We've built China. They actually have a saying that they say back in the day, they have a saying, be careful raising a baby tiger. Someday it'll grow up and it will eat you. And that's exactly what we've done. So it's not a matter of decoupling and that it's too big to decouple. When you're in a war, think about that. And we are in a war. And when this does go to conventional warfare, kinetic warfare, what are you going to do with decoupling at that point? Whose terms are you going to be on with decoupling at that point? So the point is, companies are now having to actually look at that entire piece of it. And from China being strong enough to wage this unrestricted war, as well as the conventional war piece of it. But at the same time, companies also need to be planning for the demise or the implosion of China with their economy. So either way, whether it's decoupling, whether it's unrestricted war, which we're in forever with China, as long as the CCP is in power, we will have this forever war on a continuum, and on it's not a win or lose. It's going to be a constant pressure on the free world that we have to deal with. So those are all things that have to be considered. But this article brings it all to the forefront. This is a seminal article. It's a paradigm shift with what those of us who have been in the counterintelligence sector for a long time have been waiting for. We've been waiting for the Pentagon to finally wake up and say, okay, we see it now. We see this whole unrestricted warfare thing, and it's not just a conventional or kinetic war issue.
And going back to your little baby tiger and then the fully grown tiger analogy really quickly, given, if we use that analogy, that China or communist China is now this big tiger, What should the U.S. be doing in terms of countering that? It seems this Pentagon release is a good step in that direction, but what are the other steps that need to be taken?
We need to be decoupling. We need to stop investment in China, whether it's financial plants, technology, any of that type of stuff. We need to stop investing in China. We need to absolutely shut down leading edge technology sales or collaboration with China, whether it's in our universities, whether it's Silicon Valley, AI, quantum computing, and so on. Let me just ask the question. Would you really want to be giving technology to Nazi Germany a year or two before World War II breaks out? This is the same thing that we're talking about now. Only this time, it's World War II all over again, but at the speed of technology and the stealth of unrestricted warfare. And it's from a factor of about 100x of World War II, because technology it can affect everyone, all the way down to social media, where it's reprogramming our children, their values, to hate their country, to hate their parents, to hate their schools, and to be addicted to social media with dopamine and all that type of stuff, and where they can't think critically and all that. So this is war. This absolutely is war. And again, this article really is a paradigm shift for every American to get behind. Send this article to everybody that you know. This is the wake-up call that America's been waiting for. Not just the balloon. This probably was precipitated by the balloon incident. The balloon really was the aha moment. It was this generation's Pearl Harbor event.
According to APD, that crash happened around 2:30 this morning on I-75 near 10th Street. Investigators say a Kia Soul was on Buford Highway when their driver hit that concrete wall. Their car rolled over and then fell into I-75. Another car then hit the Kia Soul. That driver of the Soul was killed. No one else was hurt. Burnt rubble, that's all that's left of a Cobb County home after a fire earlier today. Cobb County firefighters were called to the Jamison Road around 1 this afternoon, where they found intense flames and smoke. It took 15 units to get the fire under control. The firefighters say the home and nearby garage were both destroyed. No injuries were reported. In DeKalb County, police need your help to track down a missing teenager. Officials say 13-year-old Dinaka was last seen on Saturday leaving her home on Evansville Road. That's near Stonecrest Mall. Now, she's described as being 5 feet, around 100 pounds, with brown eyes, black hair, and 2 nose piercings. She was wearing a pink jacket with blue jeans and Jordan sneakers. Anyone with information being asked to contact police.
She loved her family, she loved her friends, and she showed up for them. And I want the community to show up for her too.
Brittany Glover would have turned 34 this past week. Instead, her mom commemorated her senseless death. A driver struck and killed her as she tried to cross Donald Lee Holloway Parkway.
It's been 6 months and the perpetrators have not been arrested. So I want to ask the community, if you know something, say something.
With that call for justice, Brittany's mom is calling for change.
There's different things that the city and state can do now that can help prevent or minimize the number of fatalities that we have.
She thinks something as simple as a pedestrian crosswalk with lights could have saved her daughter's life. One business owner says that stretch of state highway has become way too dangerous.
Y'all are building clearly residential communities on a state highway. It doesn't make sense to invite families here if you can't make it safe for them to exist.
At least 13 people have been killed on Donald Lee Holloway Parkway since 2017. About half of them, including Brittany, are not in a car.
We can't bring Brittany back, but we can certainly work on small transit opportunities like putting a light right here at this intersection.
Councilmember Keisha Wade says since it's a state highway, it's out of the city's hands, but she plans on reaching out to the General Assembly to create change.
I want to prevent somebody else's family from going through the same thing that I've gone through.
And get this, Georgia ranks as one of the deadliest states in the country for pedestrians. In 2021, 322 people throughout the state were killed by cars while on foot. We reached out to GDOT for comment on the changes Brittany's family is pushing for, but we have not yet heard back. In Atlanta, Rob DiRienzo, Fox 5 News.
All right, Rob, thanks so much. Situation there. It made that emergency landing on the highway of 1 185. That's near Pine Mountain. It's the second emergency landing that we've reported on this year. Fox 5's Kim Leffler joins us. Kim, luckily there were no injuries, but that big story and big question tonight is why?
Well, the FAA says it was all due to engine issues, but one pilot that I spoke to told me that when pilots experience an engine failure like this, they have to make a split-second decision, and options can sometimes be limited. Cook County officials started getting calls around 1:45 Sunday afternoon about a Cessna plane that landed on I-185.
He did land on the roadway, and then once emergency vehicles got there, they were able to actually roll the plane off of the interstate to clear it so traffic could open back up. So it didn't actually stay on the roadway for not a long time at all.
Officials say the pilot was the only one on board. No injuries or damage were reported. This comes after a small plane had to make an emergency landing on I-985 in Gwinnett County on January 24th, closing down the interstate for about an hour and a half, also a result of an engine failure. Pilots say when engine failures happen, they're forced to make a quick decision to find the safest place to land.
You would be kind of digesting how high you are, how fast you're going, which is going to combine to basically let you know how far you can get. You're looking for something out in the open, as flat as possible, normally, with as few obstructions and dangers to you as you can see. So, I mean, in a small plane, a long stretch of interstate, particularly if it's not bumper-to-bumper traffic, is going to be one of your better options.
Following the landing, crews worked to get the fuel out and dismantle the plane so it could be towed away from the road.
I mean, it's just great that he was able to do what he did without there any injuries or striking any vehicles or anything. It was a successful emergency landing.
The FAA will now be investigating this incident. Eric.
All right, Kim, grateful that.
Yes, Atlanta. That's always the same thing I do when I'm stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic on Georgia 400 on the way home, but maybe not like that tone. But that's not what Joey Logano meant when he said...
What's the matter, Lime? Y'all can't figure out where this address is? It's 1001 Ponce de Leon Avenue. You can't leave your stuff on private property. Come pick it up.
For heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America.